Welcome to this introduction to some of the new features in MyID 12.7. In this video we will look at the changes we have made to how MyID manages certificates for additional identities. In MyID, a user account typically represents a person, and usually they need credentials to prove their identity is trusted, which could be in order to access systems, sign and encrypt information, or allow access to physical locations or services. In many cases, a person may have multiple identities that they need to represent. Common use cases are people who require privileged access to systems or information, for example, system administrators, or where separate user accounts are required to access IT systems that hold sensitive data. MyID can manage enrollment and issuance of these certificates and put certificates for all of these identities onto a single physical device to remove the need to carry several devices around. In 12.7, we have refreshed this feature to make managing additional identities simpler, add greater control and flexibility, and open up access through the MyID REST APIs for greater integration possibilities with your systems. It is also now possible to set advanced filters that restrict which accounts can be selected as additional identities, both for operators managing this information for other people and also when allowing self-service users to manage their own information. You can now also create additional identities without having to connect to a directory, so you can issue certificates for use on disconnected environments that trust your certificate authority. In most cases, the additional identity represents a user account on a Windows domain, so the source of information is Active Directory. In MyID, you can import this information when MyID has a connection to the directory. As it will represent an alternative identity, and in many cases with privileged access, then you need to make sure that only appropriate accounts are linked in this way. MyID can apply a filter to the directory search using LDAP filter syntax that restricts the accounts that are available. This filter is part of global configuration, so only MyID system administrators can set this. For example, you can ensure that only members of a particular security group in the directory are returned, or only those that match a specific naming convention. When the record is added, MyID will also bring in important information required to provide a certificate for Windows authentication, which now includes the user SID value. This is an important piece of information to ensure certificates are compatible with changes to Windows certificate-based authentication. Once the information is added, it can be viewed in the Additional Identities tab on the person's record. MyID credential profile controls which devices can hold additional identity certificates, so you can ensure a specific business process is followed to get one, or control who can receive, issue, or manage them. Certificates for the primary identity and the additional identity are issued at the same time and written to the same device, with the same PIN being used to authenticate with the certificate. A report lets you easily search and list the user accounts that have additional identities. You can also filter by attributes of the additional identity, the certificate policy assigned, or whether there is a user SID attribute present in MyID. The information can be exported from MyID to help with audits of privileged user accounts. Selecting one of these records lets you access a detailed view showing you all information held by MyID. This view also lets you manage that additional identity. One person may have multiple additional identities that they use, particularly where they are managing different IT environments or systems. These accounts may be added or removed at any time, so it's important that receiving new certificates is a simple process. When you add another additional identity, MyID will create an update for any device assigned to the person that is allowed to hold the additional identity certificates. When the update is collected, MyID will check which certificates need to be removed from the device and then issue new certificates where another is required. Where the additional identity just needs to be removed, it is easy to trigger this from MyID. Removing the additional identity will trigger revocation of the certificate, but will not affect any of the credentials the user account has. As the certificate is now revoked, then once the certificate authority revocation lists are republished, then authentication will be prevented. The next time the device is updated, the revoked certificate will be removed. You can now create additional identities in MyID without having to import them from a directory. This opens up the possibilities of the feature by providing details for identities that are not within your Active Directory environment connected to MyID. This capability is open to administrators of MyID rather than self-service users to ensure that information entered is accurate and from a trusted source. The details of these additional identities can also be edited so that you can modify information as necessary, including changing the certificate policy required or attributes of the identity. Once your changes have been saved, MyID will create an update request for any devices that can hold the additional identities assigned to the person. An update request can be collected using MyID self-service, avoiding the need to return the device to an administrator. You can also allow end users to manage their own additional identities where the identity is from a connected directory. This helps take the burden away from administrators or help desk staff. In order to ensure only appropriate identities can be selected, we apply a different filter to locate the records. You can combine information about the primary identity in MyID to help filter Active Directory records they are permitted to use as additional identities. Once the changes have been made, they can use the self-service app to synchronize the certificates on their device with their user account in MyID. This will add or remove certificates as necessary based on the changes to their account. To summarize what we have seen in this video, you can import additional identities for privileged user accounts from a directory connected to MyID. LDAP filters can restrict which accounts can be selected as additional identities. You can create an additional identity by entering data in the user interface or MyID Core API for environments where MyID does not have a direct connection. You can put multiple additional identity certificates onto a single device and change them at any time. Updates will resync the certificates, removing or adding certificates as necessary, and removing an additional identity from the account will revoke the associated certificate, and all managed via Operator Client User Interface or the MyID Core API. Thanks for watching this introduction to additional identities in MyID 12.7. Further details about this release can be found on the Interseed customer portal, including product documentation and release notes.